Hello again, and welcome back this time to an adventure in reading. The book I'm going to be talking about and giving my thoughts on is Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, uh, his 2004 novel. And as you can see, the copy I have is a movie tie-in cover. The film, I believe, was 2011 or 2012. Don't know, haven't seen it. And based on what some folks whose opinions I trust have said, I don't know that I will ever see it. But in any event, this was the July selection of the Hatter's Bookshop Book Club. And we had our meeting about a couple weeks back and discussed the book. And just wanted to give you my thoughts on this book and tell you a little bit about it. In what I say, I will probably be giving a few spoilers about the structure of the book, but I don't think anything important about plot or characters. Um, First off, the book, if you are not aware of it, it's been described as having a structure kind of like a Russian nesting doll. Um, you have six different characters, and the first six parts of the book, well, first five parts of the book, tell the story, half the story of one character. I believe in the first story, it ends basically mid sentence. But anyway, you have like half of the story for the first five characters. When you get to the sixth character in the sixth story, that entire story is completed, and then you get to read the second halves of each of the story in reverse order. So part one is completed by part 12, part two by part 11, so on and so forth. Just tell you a little bit about the style of this book. It's very different. And in a minute, when I talk about the reactions of the book club, I think it's fair to say that for everyone there, the structure of the book was the thing that people struggled with the most. Myself included, probably. But the first story is about an American traveling in the South Pacific in the 1840s, and the story is told in the form of his journal, at least the first half of his journal. The next story, which incorporates an individual who finds half of that journal, is set in the 1930s in Belgium. And that story is told in the form of letters from the main character of that story to his lover. The third story is kind of set in the 1970s, and it's in the style of an action thriller. Dan Brown, but done a whole lot better, I think. Um, And in that story, the letters from the second character to his lover are an integral part of the plot. From there, you go to the fourth story is something like a comedic farce about a vanity publisher who's struggling to publish a somewhat infamous memoir and gets his hands on the first half of story outlined in the third part. So as you can see, what happens in the stories cascade upward. They influence the plot and what happens in each of the subsequent stories. And like I say, it's the funniest of the stories. But like I say, deals with this publisher and problems he gets into. Um, the the fifth story is set, I guess, in somewhat of a near future. Say, well, not too distant future, let's say within the next 50 years. It's a speculation. Set in Korea. Um, and it details probably the most unique viewpoint character in the novel. A clone, some kind of reminded me of replicants from Blade Runner, but that kind of an individual who's basically coming to terms trying to be free, trying to be a fully realized person. Um, like I say, post-apocalyptic, well, not post-apocalyptic, but a somewhat apocalyptic dystopian. There's the word. Dystopian science fiction kind of story. And there is a recording, like a hologram recording of her interview, of an interview she conducts, in which What she really, really wants is to see the film based on the last story, the fourth story about the publisher, and she gets to see half of it, and it influences her actions. And then the last story is post-apocalyptic. It's set in Hawaii in much farther future after like I say, after an apocalyptic event. Humanity is on the ropes, and you get the inference that it's not just localized, that it's all over the world. More children are born dead than alive. It's like humanity's dying out. And the culture has become very primitive. The dialect is very primitive, very corrupted English. One of the people in the book club struggled dealing with the way that dialect was portrayed, and I get it. It made things difficult. Um, but then that story is completed in a straight line with no interruption. And then the second half of each story, leading up to it, the first five parts, is told in descending order. So that by the end of the book, you're back in South Seas of the Pacific in the 1840s with that character and his adventures and misadventures getting home to California. Um, like I say, it's a difficult structure. It's a very unique structure. Um, but like I say, I think I struggled the least with it, or let's say I accepted it more than the other readers. Um, and in our book club, we kind of, as a way to get the discussion started, we do a 5-star rating. I probably gave it the highest rating of anybody in the book club. I think I gave it 3.5 stars, and I think that was either the highest or tied for the highest. I liked the book, and don't get me wrong, everyone else liked at least parts of the book, or were glad they read it, or recognized the quality of the writing, but they all struggled with the book, myself included. Myself included. But the themes in the book, uh, I think, are trying to imply that the main characters in each of these stories are reincarnations, or at the very least but at the very least they are connected. But the implication is they may be reincarnations of each other. That the first character comes back as the second, and so on, up the storyline. Um, all of the stories demonstrate, in a lot of ways, oftentimes humanity at its worst. People doing bad things to other people, and sometimes whole nations doing bad things to other nations, or groups doing bad things to other groups. Especially the last two stories. Um, but let me pause one sec. Sorry about that. Usually it's very peaceful here at the cabin in the woods, but the neighbors are mowing, and so I wanted to let them get a little distance before I try and wrap up. But you have those themes. You have the themes of interconnectedness. What one character does has profound effects on the next character, and so on. Um, but you have this sense of continuity from the 1840s to the far future. That things that happened in the distant past have effects that cascade down through time, um, to this far-flung future. Um, uh, as I was reading it, I got vibes of sometimes Buddhist philosophy. Of course, they believe in reincarnation and the cycle of karma. And there was, I think, some of that going on. There is one character who meets, well, let's say, a self-inflicted bad end. And in my reading of the story, it may have caused his soul to split. It's just a theory I have. Because I think instead of a direct reincarnation, the characters in the third and fourth stories are both him. Just my, once again, I don't want to get into too much because I don't want to spoil it any more than I have to, just to kind of express my thoughts. But there's those kind of vibes going on. Um, Reading through it, I was also reminded of Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence. He had a thought experiment where basically he asked someone to consider, you know, if if you were told you're going to live this life that you're living with all its joys, but with all its pains forever, again and again and again, for eternity, would you still, would you go on and do that? Would you live the life you've lived for all eternity? And if not, then, it shows something about you and how you feel about life in general. But if you do, it shows that you love life and that you're willing to embrace it, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. Basically, it's kind of an experiment about how you view life and the value of life, particularly your own life. Um, and I kind of, like I say, kind of got those vibes from this book as well. Um, but oh, would I recommend it to someone else? Um, maybe, but it can be a difficult read. And so I don't know. I'd need to know about your reading tastes before I'd recommend reading this book. This is this. I was talking a little bit about how the book club selects books, and I told you about the first two. One, we all knew we were going to read Alice in Wonderland as the first book. It's the Hatter Bookshop. It's kind of that theme of the store. So it's pretty much a given. We were all going to read Alice in Wonderland, which was fine by me. The second book, as I said, was decided by a Facebook poll. Since then, at the end of every book club meeting, you have an opportunity to what we call advocate for a book. And everyone present writes their book or any book, on a slip of paper. It goes into a bag, and then we go around the room drawing those slips out. And basically, the last man standing, the last book that has a vote, is the one we're going to read next. And most of the time, the way it works out, someone has lobbied very persuasively for a book. It gets a whole bunch of votes, and because it got so many votes, chances are it's going to be the one selected. And in the first voting that went that way, I advocated for A Gentleman in Moscow, My Immortals, and it got more than half. It got more than half of the votes that were available at that meeting. Lo and behold, it was the one we read next. And with a couple of exceptions, I think everyone really, really liked that book. In fact, it's still my favorite book of the selections we've read so far, and the one I'm most likely to read. Although I will tell you this, I do want to reread Cloud Atlas, but I'm going to do a little experiment with it. Instead of reading it as a Chinese nesting doll, going through the stories half at a time and then the concluding halves, I think I'm going to read it as an anthology. Go read the first story and then skip to part 12 and finish that story, and see how it works differently as an anthology of 6 stories rather than as a novel. Like I said, just a thought. But in any event, back to the way these votes go, and that's probably been the pattern for most of the books we've selected since we started that system. The book that gets the most votes has been the one that was the next read. This one was a little different. I was the only person in the June meeting who voted for Cloud Atlas. And there were like 12 people voting, and we got this book. And it made me feel a little nervous. Particularly since the book was not, I say it was appreciated, but not so much praised. I think everybody at the meeting was glad that they read it. It was a really good discussion, trying to connect the book and what that and I think one of my and like I say, I don't think it's a perfect book by any stretch. I only gave it 3.5 stars. But in my one of my big criticisms of the book was there needed to be more connections to make this work. There needed to be more connections between the characters, and there were plenty. There were a bunch that spanned time and space. But I was just clamoring for more of that. Finding the Easter eggs. And who knows? Maybe when I read it again, I'll find more. But anyway, um, overall, like I say, if I knew your reading tastes and I know you like particular kinds of fiction, there's a subset of readers I would certainly recommend this to. Um, but it's not a book for everybody, and that's okay. And I think book clubs are a great place to experiment with your reading and expand your horizons. We have read, well, let's see. I guess if you count the book that I'm going to mention in a few minutes, we will have read 8 books this year for book club, and many of them I certainly wouldn't have read of my own volition. but it's okay because I have not had one book yet that I read that I regret reading. Um, uh, like I say, even the ones that just really weren't my thing, I'm glad I read them because they were all pretty good experiences. And in that regard, I want to show you briefly before I say goodbye. This is the book we'll be reading later this month in August. Um, Door into Ocean by Jane. Oh golly, let's see if I can remember how to pronounce it. I think it's Slansowiski, I think. Well, it's Polish, and I struggle with Polish. But um, science fiction novel set in the future on a water world. Uh, Enjoyed it so far, and hopefully will have it read in the next week and a half, which will be in time for, oh man, maybe even a week. But I think I can finish certainly by the time book club meets. Looking forward to have the discussion on this one. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. I cannot recommend being in a live book club enough. Um, Book reading can be a solitary project, but it's so much more enjoyable and fulfilling if you can share those thoughts with others. And that's why I love buddy reads. I love book club. Um, and continuing on to see how this plays out. Like I say, it truly will be an adventure in reading. But with that, I think I am finished. So I will say goodbye for now. And as I always say, um, uh, stay safe and have good adventures in book hunting.